minutes out.
Okay, great. You can join us when you're ready.
We're going to start. We'll start here, and then the next one, boom, boom, boom. The next one, boom, boom, boom. So then nobody's. And then it'll be boom, boom, boom. See what I'm saying?
Just tell us when to move.
Yeah.
And then Steve is our timer. So he's got the timer and he's got your warning.
That way everybody gets to be first.
Perfect, yes. We get it. Maybe like 15 or 20 of these. So.
Yeah, you know.
All the rules change slightly each time.
No, we just want to.
Is this on?
Yep.
Okay.
We start with on my left.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. This is a different mic, folks, but it's only me. That's okay. They'll be able to talk with the good mic. Okay, we're going to have opening statements from our candidates. Mr. Garcia had some traffic problems on I-10. When he gets here, he'll join us. So we'll begin with opening statements from Senator Farr.
Take a look around. See how this works? This is what change looks like. I'm pretty darn excited about this because I'm seeing these kind of crowds all over this state. This is phenomenal. As upset as we all were in November 2016 by what happened then. And my youngest daughter, Gigi, she locked herself in her room for 3 days while binge watching Hillary videos and sobbing. So I know, I think we all felt that way to a certain extent. But now we can look back at that day as the day complacency died. And this is exactly what happens when people realize that we've got to stand up right now and save our democracy. This is what's going to happen to create change across Arizona. We already saw a 16-point Democratic swing out there in Sun City in that congressional special election. 16-point swing in Sun City. A worst-case scenario for Democrats. We're going to get that done across this state, and I'm thrilled because we're not just going to get support of Democrats. Independents want change. Republicans want change. Across the board, people are done with reality show stars and ideological warriors. They just want grown-ups in the room solving problems. And I would love to be that grown-up. So thank you for coming here today. For those of you who aren't familiar with me, I know a lot of you know me very well because I've been coming here for years. I've been serving Tucson in the state legislature for the last 12 years. 6 in the House, 6 in the Senate. And I'm grateful to have that opportunity for your service. I'm also the guy that did those murals downtown, those big black and white photo murals of people walking down the street in the 50s. I'm a public artist. I use my right brain and my left brain at the same time to solve problems. And my parents were both public school teachers. My daughters both went to Arizona public school, so we got to invest in public education. Thank you. I'd love to have your support.
I'm Kelly Fryer, and I am working really hard to become your next governor. I got to tell you, you probably saw that Doug Ducey had an op-ed article in the paper this past week. Did you see it? In this article, he used his platform to attack those people that are calling for the end of ICE and who are calling for a new approach to new human rights approach to immigration. Instead of asking why we have children in cages on our border. Any one of the 3 people running for governor right now would be better than Doug Ducey. I think anybody in this room would be better than Doug Ducey. But here's the thing, this year, you don't have to choose just not Doug Ducey. This year, you have a real choice. Here's what I bring. A vision of an Arizona for everyone. And I really mean everyone. A plan. If you've been to my website, you know I have the most detailed proposals about the most issues of anyone in this race. And third, I bring 29 years of executive and CEO leadership, helping people come together around shared values and a shared vision to do what matters. I got to tell you, my first job was at a bank where the bank president told us after 2 weeks we needed to sign a paper saying that we wouldn't talk about the nuclear power plant that was being built because the utility was the bank's biggest customer. I stood on the First Amendment and got fired. And then I went to work for the organization that shut that plant down as a field organizer. And I've been fighting ever since for progressive values and for justice. As a pastor, as a seminary professor, and now as the CEO of the YWCA, part of the oldest civil rights and social justice organization in the country. I'm running to be the governor of Arizona because we need justice in this state for children, for teachers, for folks that are living in economic poverty, for people of color. I'm running to be your governor because I'm a fighter, and I will make Arizona change for the better and for all of us. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to start with our first question. And folks, we seem to have plenty, but if you want to try, you can still try and hand them up here. Pat is going to be collecting. First question. As governor, what would you or could you do to counteract the atrocities being carried out by the Trump administration?
To be more specific. There's a lot of atrocities.
Who started?
We'll start. You speak just.
We take turns, whoever has the microphone. And Kelly, will you repeat the question, please, back there, about counteracting the atrocities and then start with comment.
The question is, as governor, what could we do to counteract the atrocities of the Trump administration? Which ones? Let's start with what's happening on the border right now. One of the first things that I'll do as governor is to call the National Guard troops home. Man, you guys are being so good about not clapping. It's got to be so hard. The second thing I'm going to do is to end every single contract with private prisons and detention centers in this state. And I'm going to bring those centers under my control so that I can make sure that the people who are being detained by the Trump administration are being treated in the most humane way possible. I'd like to make Arizona a model for human rights when it comes to criminal justice in this country. The third thing that I'm going to do to deal with what's going on the border right now is to change the narrative about who our neighbors are. I work with thousands of immigrant women at the YWCA. No one works harder. No one cares more about their families, about our community, about their own lives and making a positive new start. I'll tell that story on Rachel Maddow, for starters, and to every media outlet in this country so that people know the truth. We don't have rapists and murderers trying to come across our border. We have neighbors and family and friends and co-workers and employees and customers. I don't know. I need another 4 hours to talk about the rest of the atrocities, but I'll stop there.
Thank you.
I think the best way to respond to the Trump administration is actually to be a grown-up in the room. Because that's exactly what we don't have right now in Washington, D.C. And I think that's what's really causing a lot of backlash against his administration, even among Republicans. We need to have somebody who is willing to work with all sides, who is willing to work with civility, who is willing to bring people together to solve basic problems and get back to the issues. And every day we wake up with a different tweet that tries to throw us off in a different direction. Utter chaos. Throwing us here, throwing us there, trying to keep us totally off our game, We got to stay focused on what we need to do in this state, and that is invest in our education system at every level so we can thrive, not merely survive this century, so that we can provide every human being in this country decent, affordable health care, because health care is a human right, not a privilege. And the more we talk about whether or not he's walking in front of Queen Elizabeth, the less we're talking about how we can get health care for all of us. People in America want to get back to the basics of how we can improve our lives. Getting a decent job, having health care so we don't have to worry about where we're going to get it, making sure our kids have the tools they need to be able to succeed, and just getting it done. And I want to return the idea that government can be a force for good in people's lives, not a force we're afraid of the way we are with the Trump administration. We can actually have people in my administration who believe in the mission of the departments they are leading. And we can rise as a state once again and return to an ideal that Arizona is for everyone, and Arizona can rise to exactly where we know it can be.
Okay, this question. Why do you think you are the candidate who can mobilize the independents to vote for a Democrat?
That's a great question, and that's one of the things I'm really excited to see all over the state when I've been traveling for the last 18 months. What the question is, what can you do to get independence? Independents are really excited about my campaign for that very same grown-up factor. Part of the reason people are independents is they feel like folks have gotten too ideological. And I think that is one of the major threats we see to our country, is this polarization where we start to see each other as enemies instead of fellow Americans. Those indictments that were just handed down to all those Russian agents, they're sowing that stuff. We have more in common than what divides us, and I'm convinced of that. If we get back to those basics of governance, if we create good government that is actually able to do things like give us a decent transportation system, create jobs through investing in ourselves, have schools where you don't have classrooms with roofs collapsing and HVAC systems falling apart, or teachers leaving to other states because they can't afford to teach here. Get back to investing in ourselves and get these things done. That's how you appeal to independence. When I go over to all different parts of the state, I'm even seeing Republicans in rural areas who are furious with Doug Ducey for the cuts to our public education system. Because even in rural areas especially, even hard-right Republicans see their public school as the center of their community. And they understand how it hurts us all when that gets cut off. It's time that we take back the ability of people in Arizona to govern our own governance, not connected insiders.
So the question is, how do we attract independents? I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I have Republicans on my campaign committee. You see, this is not, the issues that we face in Arizona, they're not partisan issues. What we're talking about, the challenges that we face, we're not talking about political issues. When we start talking about, how do we make sure that every single child in Arizona has access to a great public education? When we talk about the fact that 30% of the kids in our state live in economic poverty, when we talk about the fact that in Phoenix and Mesa, in Maricopa County, there have been more police-involved shootings of unarmed people and disproportionately people of color, more than almost any other state in the country. We're not talking about political issues. We're talking about moral issues. We have a moral crisis in our state and in our country. And it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, an independent, or a Republican on a deep level, you know that. That's the conversation I'm having in this campaign. That's the conversation I'll bring to the governor's office, and that crosses party lines.
Hold on to the mic, Kelly, because you'll answer first.
Next question. What will be your number one legislative priority if both the Senate and House turn blue?
What will your number one priority be if the House and the Senate both turn blue? Here's the truth. The folks who have bought our government and who have been in control for decades have so messed things up that even if we have a Democratic majority in our House and in our Senate, we aren't going to be able to create the comprehensive tax reform that needs to happen because they've managed to make a rule that says you have to have a 2/3 majority vote in order to raise taxes in Arizona. So that means we have to basically take it over. Now, I know everybody wants a blue wave. All we have to do is get blue people in government to change everything. The problems are more complicated than that. So what we need to do is get the bullies out of government. That means we have to have people in charge, a governor in charge who cannot be bought. You're looking at her.
Well, the fact is, whether or not we're able to take a Senate and House majority for Democrats, my priorities aren't going to change because for the last 12 years, I've actually proven that we can do significant things across the aisle, even with Republicans. In 2013, one of the most significant things of my tenure in the legislature was when Jan Brewer, of all people, who I disagreed with about almost everything, reached out and said, do you think you can expand Medicaid health care to 400,000 people in poverty? I said, yes, we can. We held the caucus together. We found a few Republicans. We rolled the speaker and the president, and we literally saved lives, and we kept our hospitals afloat. Absolutely vital stuff. We can do things like that even without having the majority. I think we're going to get the majority in the Senate. We'll come close in the House. But you have to be able to work with the legislature and understand the processes and the people and the policies that come before the governor. I'm the only candidate who's running for governor on the Democratic side who has ever served in elected office. And I've served 12 years in the legislature, so I understand how to work this stuff. I know how to use a carrot and a stick when necessary. So we will be able to get this done. But one thing I'm going to do, regardless of what happens in the legislature, on day one, is I'm going to sign an executive order to put Arizona right back in the Paris Climate Change Accords. Because we are ground zero for climate change. Water, forest fires, heat. We can change it, and we can make money off of doing that, and I'm hoping we got a climate change question later so I can tell you exactly how we do that. Investing in solar. Thank you.
How will you support true universal background checks, including at all gun shows?
This is a very personal issue to me, as it is for many of us in this room. January 8th. This is about universal background checks. How do you support them? January 8th meant a lot to all of us here in Tucson. Gabby is a friend of mine. Daniel Hernandez, now in the House, he was my campaign manager in 2010. I gave him his first job. He called me from the ambulance that day and told me Gabby's been shot. I got to the hospital. From the earliest minutes, you don't know what to do. You don't know anything what to do. You don't know what's happening. Who's been hurt? Who's been killed? My youngest daughter, Gigi, knew exactly what to do. We were in a room with Gabby's mom and Ron Barber's family, and she got right down on her knees and held Gabby's mom's hand and looked into her eyes. That was the only thing you can do when it's done. But there are things you can do to stop it from happening in the first place. Universal background checks are one of those things. When it went into place after Sandy Hook in Connecticut, the deaths and injuries from gun violence went down by 45%. I have introduced that bill year after year. It's been refused to be heard by this legislature. That will change once I'm in office and we push this to make it happen, because 97% of gun owners support universal background checks. 97% of gun owners, think about that. They understand that common sense gun laws can be done, because it's time to put a governor in place who isn't in the pockets of the NRA, so we can actually govern for all the people of Arizona who understand that safety is for everyone.
Most Arizonans believe that we can protect the Second Amendment and create common sense gun safety laws. But there has not been a common sense gun safety law passed by this legislature. And I just need to disagree with something that I've heard here today and something I hear over and over again when I'm in these public forums and debates, and that is the idea that you can just magically start reaching across the aisle and working with the people who are in the Arizona state legislature right now. That is a myth. That's a fallacy. If it was going to happen, it would have happened over the last 12 years. I specialize in walking into an organization that is in crisis or distress or dysfunction and helping people turn it around to create meaningful change. It's what I got famous for doing it in churches. That's what I've been doing for 29 years. And I'll tell you something, in every dysfunctional system, there are bullies. And the bullies in Arizona are in our Arizona state legislature. And there's only one way that we create change, and that is to neutralize their power and marginalize them. It's the only way. And you know how you do that? You do that by forming a coalition of people of influence. And you know who the people of influence are in Arizona? You. March for Our Lives, Red for Ed, women's marches. We have a movement happening here in Arizona. And what we need is a governor who will give the microphone to the people of Arizona and use our collective power to move those bullies out of the way so that we can create real change in Arizona. That's the only way we're going to get gun laws passed here.
The governor has tried to take control of the Central Arizona Project water from the CAP board. Who should administer our allotment? Who goes first? It's you, Kelly.
The water crisis in Arizona is one of the biggest issues that we're facing right now. And we have people in our state who are working on these issues. At ASU, there are some of the smartest scientists in the country working on water policy. What we need to have the right people at the table making these decisions about water. If you go to the Water Commission right now, if you go to the people if you go to the website and you see the names of the people who are making decisions about who gets our allotment and what these agreements will look like and how we deal with the water crisis, you know who's at the table right now? Representatives of big companies, representatives of the utilities, representatives from the mines. I will put together a water task force that is made up of our best environmental scientists, that is made up of our energy entrepreneurs who are at work right now in our state, members of our tribes and impacted communities. And I will charge them with creating a comprehensive plan for water and have that on my desk within 6 months. That's the only way that we begin to really solve this problem, is to get the right people at the table.
I'll tell you how you don't deal with water is you don't do what Doug Ducey did over the last year. And it's actually not Doug Ducey. It's his chief of staff, a guy named Kirk Adams, who actually writes policy for the state of Arizona. Doug Ducey reads talking points, in case you hadn't seen that. He convened a series of people, a series of meetings that were secret and behind closed doors. Invitation only. No one even knew about these meetings for months until it was finally leaked to the press. And that the purpose of that was not to actually solve our water problems, but to use water in a way to solve some of his own political problems. He had sort of a complicated string of things he was trying to do to get things together in order to get some money so he could spend on something he wanted to and get certain people on board. That's not how you deal with water. Water is something we all live or die on, literally. The model I want to see for how we go approach this issue is Bruce Babbitt and the efforts he did to create the 1980 Groundwater Management Act, which is seen around the world as a model for how you work together to actually create change and allow us all to benefit together. Everyone is at the table. Everyone. It takes as long as it takes so everyone is there. We all got to work together and agree with what could happen. And there are a lot of things we could do. In agriculture alone, we actually took a step forward with that because agriculture is 70% of the users of water right now. Alfalfa and cotton are the biggest water users, and they're also water thirsty. We just legalized the growing of hemp for agricultural purposes. Hemp can replace both textiles and animal feed and use 10% of the water. There's a lot we can do if we work together with everyone at the table, and that actually makes more money for farmers too.
Global warming, climate change is our most urgent issue. Nothing else really matters if we destroy our planet. What is your environmental protection plan for Arizona?
Global warming and climate change is this question. As I mentioned before, day one, I'm signing an executive order to put us right back in the Paris Climate Change Accords. When you see this heat, the intensity of the storms, I mean, washing out the transcontinental line of Union Pacific, that hasn't happened before. That was right here in Marana. In Sky Harbor, shut down for an entire day last summer at 116 degrees because the planes can't have lift at that temperature. Climate scientists are saying 130 will be regular in downtown Phoenix in 10 to 20 years. Can we stand our state's largest port being shut for a month and a half every summer for our economy? And what does that do to the rest of us? Our wildfires, our water supply, all the rest of it. The good news is that we can solve this problem while making a whole lot of money off of it. We are where Texas was with oil in the 1920s with solar energy. Forget Texas oil, West Virginia coal. We ought to be powering this nation on Arizona's sunshine. And if we retrofit our entire structure, we can make money off of that too. California's got a 50% renewable standard. We got transmission infrastructure going right there. We could sell that power at a premium to California, make our money, grow our economy, invest in ourselves, and mitigate climate change at the same time. The only reason we're not doing this is because we don't have the proper leadership to make it happen. I will be that leader to make this happen. We all depend on it.
So I'm going to do three things to address the environmental crisis that we face in Arizona. The first thing that I'll do is in my first week, I will sign an executive order that forms a non-geographic 2030 district that includes every Arizona-owned building. Those of you who are into the environmental movement know that the 2030 districts have been formed. There's one right here in Tucson that's been formed that the YWCA in Southern Arizona is part of. Cities and towns all across the country are forming 2030 districts. And what that means is that you will work towards cutting your water use and cutting your energy use in half by 2030. So that will require Arizona to get very serious about every building that we use for our state buildings, including all of our schools and universities. Secondly, I will create an environmental justice league. If you're a comic book fan, you know the reference. That environmental justice league will be charged with creating a comprehensive plan for environmental sustainability in Arizona within 9 months. And that task force will include scientists, energy entrepreneurs, and impacted communities. Third, I have a 15-county economic development plan that focuses on bottom-up economic development and investing in environmental technology and renewable energy.
Okay. Do you support the Invest in Ed Act, which will most likely be on the ballot?
I want to say something very clearly. There are 3 candidates running for governor. Only one of us, me, 100% supports Invest in Ed. In fact, I had something very similar to that proposal on my website months before the ballot initiative came out. I believe that we need to reverse the tax cuts that have been made on the wealthiest Arizonans in order to fund our priorities, starting with public schools. Secondly, I am 100% opposed to using public dollars for private schools. I oppose vouchers. And third, and this is key, I believe that charter schools in Arizona should be transparent, accountable, and rare. In fact, my goal is to make those charter schools play by the same rules. And since most of them are there for profit, it'll put them out of business. I just want to say this again. I'm the only one of the 3 candidates running for governor who will say all 3 of those things. I am the education candidate in this race.
I've said all 3 of those things for 12 years. I support the Invest in Ed initiative. I did not get out in front and grandstand on it during that because the teachers are doing one heck of a job, an amazing job working with that one. And my parents were both public school teachers. So I take great offense when people say that I don't support public education. I have been supporting and fighting for public education on the record for 12 years. No other candidate can say that. I have been on the floor fighting every step of the way. I didn't buy a school bus to get out in front of this issues of the teachers. I actually have been on the floor fighting for people to be able to get the resources they need to educate their kids. Red for Ed movement was a watershed movement. I have been railing against Republican budgets that have cut education for 12 years, putting vouchers bit by bit until it blew it out of the water when Doug Ducey signed the voucher bill last year. And thank God for those teachers and parents and volunteers who referred that voucher bill to the ballot. And vote no on 305 this November. Do not forget. We must do more. The Invest for Ed initiative is $690 million. We cut K-12 by $1.1 billion since 2009. That's why I voted for the $405 million in new money for public education in this year's budget, and that's why I am advocating for the closure of $3 billion worth of the 331 corporate tax loopholes that bleed $13.7 billion a year out of our coffers. I will talk more about those tax loopholes later. We can lower taxes while investing in our schools.
Is our other candidate here?
Yeah, I think it's in the restroom.
Yes, it is. I was trying to open the door. I was told this door. Oh, no.
That's it.
That door doesn't open.
Give them the wrong information.
Yeah.
Okay, as soon as Mr. Garcia gets up to his seat, we are going to go ahead and allow him his 2-minute opening statement, and then we will continue with the questions. Okay? Let him through, folks. We need him up here.
All right. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Welcome. We're glad you made it through the traffic.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Garcia, they opened up with a 2-minute opening statement that we're going to allow you to go ahead and give your opening statement, introduce yourself, and then we'll continue with the questions.
That sounds great. Thank you very much. Everyone, my name is David Garcia, and I'm very sorry for being a little late this morning. As you saw our campaign bus out there, it looks like it's running well now. It was not in Casa Grande, so we had a little delay. My fault. So Kelly, Steve, my apologies for being late. Folks, I'm David Garcia, and I am running to lead my home state. I am Arizona's story, folks. I'm born and raised here in Arizona, a 4th-generation Arizonan. I'm a product of Arizona's public schools. I went to Mesa High School in Mesa, where I, by the way, met my daughter Lori, who's hanging out outside. She and I have been dating since we were 15 and 16.
Your wife.
Did I say my daughter? That's not the right thing. Whoever is taping that, so sorry. I'm staring at my daughter out the window, by the way. You should know. Wow. All right. Lesson learned here. Do not show up late again, Garcia. My fault. So my path was through the military. I joined the Army when I was 17. I was an 11 Bravo. Nothing fancy, carry an M16 and walk. But that experience changed my life. I got a chance to take advantage of the GI Bill. I learned some accountability, service, integrity, and came home again. I came back here, went to Arizona State, so I am a Sun Devil, and I'll have to admit that here. But I know, but my beautiful wife is a Wildcat, so you are well represented in our home for sure. And we both had the opportunity to go to the University of Chicago for grad school. Two young folks, first in their family, from Arizona to make it that far. She got a law degree there. In fact, Barack Obama was a professor there when she was a law student. Nobody knew he was going to be president, by the way, just another professor at the time. And I got my PhD. Came home again. I worked at the state legislature in education. I was the associate superintendent for the state of Arizona, so I know exactly what I'm getting into. I ran for state superintendent in 2014. We got this close because of my commitment to public education. And folks, the good news is, this time around, we're getting over the top. Thank you very much.
Okay, Steve, you'll go first.
No, he's got to answer the question on the head. The last one, doesn't he?
No.
No, okay.
Okay, we're going with a new question. Steve, you're first. And then we will go ahead and go right on down and then start making sure that we're in order here. With the upcoming Supreme Court nominee, what is your view on the repeal of Roe versus Wade?
Roe versus Wade was one of the most important rulings in the history of this country to finally restore full equality to women's reproductive rights in this state, in this country, and it must not be allowed to be overruled. I've had an A+ rating from Planned Parenthood for 12 years in a row for my voting record and my fighting for women's reproductive rights, health care rights, and all other women's rights on the floor of the Arizona Senate and the Arizona House. We must not allow government to come between a woman and her doctor, period. That's what I've seen repeatedly, over and over again, in this administration and this legislature. Governor Ducey has an advisor who is not actually an advisor. She's a lobbyist named Kathy Herod, who runs the Center for Arizona Policy. She basically has an office next to his office. Everything she believes in, he will put into law. And that means taking away every bit of women's right to be able to control their own bodies and access to reproductive care. Kathy Herod would like to take away access to contraception as well. This is where this governor is going. This is where this governor has been. This is where this majority of the legislature has been. And we need to have a governor who is a strong supporter of women's reproductive health in all its forms. And that's exactly what I have been for 12 years with a track record. And that's exactly what I will be as governor.
Thank you. First, as you know, with the appointment of Brett Kavanaugh, this fight is coming to the state level. And our state, since Roe v. Wade was passed, has continued to put more restrictions on a woman's right to choose. This election is about many things. And I'm sure we've already talked to education and immigration and others. But now it's becoming more and more apparent that this election is also about having a last line of defense. A governor who is going to veto every single bill that comes my way that restricts a woman's right to choose. We are going to protect that right. I am very proud to say that I have been endorsed in this campaign by Planned Parenthood because of my commitment to this issue and because the folks at Planned Parenthood understand that when we win, they will have that last line of defense. Thank you.
No one is going to be a stronger defender of a woman's right to have control over her own body than me. I mean, look. Some people wonder how I can have a pro-choice position, be 100% in favor of a woman's right to choose and be a former pastor. I'll tell you how. As a pastor, I have sat with women who have been in the most vulnerable place they've ever been in their lives. And I have seen the kinds of decisions that women have had to make for themselves, for their families, for their future. And no one has a right to take that choice away from us.
Okay, Dave, this is to you first. Do you support Rosemont Mine opening up a mine in the Grand Canyon?
Do you have another, did everybody understand that? All right, go ahead and repeat the question, please. I heard some murmuring out there. My mic is better.
I have a bad mic, so, not a bad mic, just not as effective.
Yes, sir. Do we support I feel like I'm getting married, the Rosemont Mine opening up in the Grand Canyon? Yes, I do not support the Rosemont Mine opening up in the Grand Canyon, folks. We have a balance to strike here in Arizona. We have a balance to strike across the world, to be frank with you. We have a balance to strike between the need of natural resources that we need. I'm staring at a phone right here that comes from the products that are come out of a mine. But we've also got to make sure we are protecting our public lands, and we are looking out for the long-term health and environment of our state and of our country. This means that we need to make decisions that are not just going to be affected in impacting today's economic questions and economic issues. It means we do what those who have been on these lands for a very long time, many of our Native American tribes, their approach is to take a 7-generation approach to this, so that we make decisions now that are going to have an impact, positive impact, or potentially not a negative impact for multiple generations. And so we've got to continue to strike that balance. We've also got to make sure that in our most pristine public lands, the place that we are most proud of in Arizona, we are particularly careful to make sure that the impact is not detrimental in those lands, and that we can all continue to enjoy those public lands, which should remain, in my opinion, in public hands. Thank you.
Do I support mining in the Grand Canyon? No. Here's what I think we need to do. We need to use our imaginations again. I don't know, I'm looking out, a lot of you are about my age or older, and I remember watching the first human beings walk on the moon. And I watched it on a black and white TV with rabbit ears. Somewhere along the way, we have lost that sense of adventure and possibility. We have lost the ability to imagine a new future. Yes, we're all looking at a phone that is made of materials that come out of the earth. Do we want to have phones? Yes, we do. So we need to figure out how to create technology, how to innovate into our future in a way that doesn't put our planet at risk. And so we can do some very concrete things here in Arizona. Like, for example, we need to renew and expand the angel investor tax credit that allows folks of wealth to invest in startup companies, high-tech startup companies here in Arizona, so that we can be encouraging and investing in the people who will take us into the future in a way that doesn't threaten our planet.
Let's be clear about Rosemont Mine. I have been, yes?
Oh, no, just the mic up.
Oh, mic up like this? Let me be clear about the Rosemont Mine. I have been opposed to it from the beginning when it became clear what big threat it would be to our water and to our tourism industry and to the agriculture industry in that area. The Rosemont Mine, as proposed in Green Valley, is not ready for prime time, period. And that's the folks who are down there who are worried about the effects on water and the effects on agriculture and the effects on tourism are right. The fact is, public lands should not be used for resource extraction exclusively. And that's what happens when you have a mine that's badly designed. Public lands or for multiple uses, for multiple purposes. And when you go to the Grand Canyon and talk about that, there is actually proposals to reopen the Grand Canyon watershed to uranium mining. This legislature and this governor have been supportive of reopening uranium mining in the Grand Canyon, even though upwards of 40,000 Navajos have died or sickened over when the original mining was happening there in the 40s and the 1950s. You don't do that. You don't put profits over people, period. That's not what we do. Here in Arizona, we love this landscape, this climate, this environment. You don't give it away to the highest dollar from some Canadian company. You keep it for ourselves and our future generations.
We're going to just have a couple of questions right now, kind of like a little lightning round, where we will ask that you just answer yes or no. Okay? Will you support the nominee, the Democratic nominee for governor, if it is not you?
Yes.
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 Do you favor abolition of Arizona's death penalty?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Okay, you gotta stand up.
Yeah.
I'm hearing some requests that we stand up so that folks can hear our answers. How about if we all stand up? You want to ask that question again?
Do you favor abolition of Arizona's death penalty law?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Did you support Prop 123?
No.
Yes.
Yes.
That ends our lightning round.
Where's the thunder round?
Well, we have a lot of questions, so I'm just trying to get through some. We have a question here, though. I think Rachel Garza from Wilcox, Arizona City Council. I guess you're here in the room. Thank you for being here. And she just wants to know how she's going to get candidates to southeastern Arizona. We know time is short, but Wilcox is feeling forgotten.
Well, I've been putting about 5,000 or 6,000 miles on my car since I started running for governor, and I am going places that other candidates don't go. All small towns, rural communities, underserved urban neighborhoods. In fact, I was up on the Kaibab Paiute reservation, way up. There are 260 people who live on that reservation. 60% of them are under the age of 18. I stood before the tribal council and they looked at me like I was lost. And they said, Kelly, candidates never come here. Nobody ever comes here. So I have been to wine country. In fact, I had a really wonderful meeting with small business owners and winemakers at Dos Cabezas Winery. So I have certainly been in your neighborhood. It was hosted by, I asked the local Democrats to host that little meet and greet. And it was very much open to the public. But I'll come back. I'll come to your house. I'll come have coffee with you at your kitchen table. I'm running because I believe that there are voices in our state that aren't being heard. And every single one of us matters. I'm running because I think Arizona should work for everyone. And that means we have to hear everyone's voice.
Well, one of the best benefits of running for statewide office is that Arizona is the best place in the world for a nonstop road trip. So I've been to Duncan a couple of times. I've been to Clifton 3 times. I went to Wilcox and hanging out in Apple Annie's because my daughters always love going to Apple Annie's to pick those. Particularly the Asian pears there are great. If the people go there for apples, but the Asian pears at Apple Annie's are amazing. Hereford, and up to Alpine, Pine Top, Payson, everywhere all over the state. You get to people everywhere where they want to talk. And that's one of the things I've been most encouraged about, is that's where I really picked that thing up that I was telling you about earlier. Especially in rural areas, people don't really want to know the ideological wars. They just want to get things done. I mean, people want to get things done. They want to talk about the HERF shift and how much our gas tax money has been stolen by this governor, the previous governor, and these legislative majority, so that they can't get their roads fixed. Up in Apache County, they have a 67-year resurfacing cycle because of that. By the time you get around the road, there's no road left to resurface. That's where I've heard so much about how rural schools are being hurt dramatically. They don't have private schools to benefit from some newfangled voucher system. They just have public schools that lose money. And that's across the board. And I loved when I saw in the Havasu News about Buster Johnson, the Tea Party supervisor, calling Doug Ducey a hypocrite in the Havasu News. There's a lot of unrest, even amongst Tea Party folks in the rural areas, and they want to get Doug Ducey out of there because they don't like him either.
First, thank you for asking the question. You're a good advocate of your community. I think that is outstanding. Folks, every campaign, every candidate gets out all across Arizona. It is a beautiful place to take a ride. Like I said, I'm from here, born and raised. My dad was a commercial painter. We didn't take a lot of fancy vacations, but we spent a lot of time around rural Arizona. Just this week, our campaign bus took a trip up through Payson. Those of you who take the beeline up to Payson, you will run into my favorite McDonald's in the entire world. Because right there at that corner, as you'd head up 260, my family would always stop at that McDonald's. It, to me, was a memory. It meant we were going up into the mountains to hike and fish, and it's always had good memories. And so we are all over the state. We not only will get to Wilcox, take a look at outside, we'll bring our campaign bus out to Wilcox as well. But here's the key, folks. You can't get to enough places and shake enough hands. It's a big state. To win, you need people organized in towns across Arizona. I'll tell you, I am so proud. Right now, we have 25 people who are organizing and building a campaign team in Douglas this morning. That's how you win this statewide, is those 25 folks knocking on their neighbors' doors are what's going to get the word out. We're looking forward to doing an event there. I am very proud to have gotten the endorsement of Beth Castro, the daughter of Raul Castro, our only other Latino governor, right at the spot where he heard from the current governor, Hunt at the time, that he could be governor. We're going to get this team to do an amazing event down there, and we look forward to doing the same in your neighborhood as well.
Steve, this goes to you first. What will you do to fight corruption and hold government and corporate officials accountable in Arizona?
This has been a big problem in Arizona. We certainly see a corruption trial happening right now about the Corporation Commission right now. And one of the people in that trial is actually Doug Ducey's college roommate and one of his best friends, a guy named Jim Norton. Watch that one carefully. I've heard a lot of stories about how procurement has got a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. We've already seen 6 different department heads appointed by Governor Ducey leave under a cloud. 6. That's what happens when you have somebody who heads up our state government who doesn't believe that state government should exist. This is a guy who is loyal to a couple of billionaires from Kansas who want to shrink government down to size, which means down to nothing. And that's what happens when you have the levers of power and you want to use them for ill. We cannot afford to have that. We have to get back to the idea that actually government can be a force for good in people's lives. And I am honored to be able to move forward and win this election and restore the idea of public service to Arizona state government. My parents, as I said, were both public school teachers. I learned that spirit of public service from them. I saw how hard they worked for how little money. When people work for my administration, they won't be working for the 20% raises or bonuses or promotions that Governor Ducey gave out at the same time as he was offering 0.4% raises to public school teachers. They're going to be working because they believe in the mission of their department. And they're going to be working for less money than they can get elsewhere because they believe in the people of Arizona.
So let's take a second and figure out how corruption gets into this process. You know how it gets there? People give you money to get elected, folks. That's how it gets there. It gets there right now at this time in the campaign. When you take money from people who are going to expect things from you when you win. Lucy, I have a suggestion for a yes or no question. Whether or not candidates up here have taken or are going to take lobbyist or corporate PAC money. Because if you take the money now, I'll give you one of my favorite sayings. How you get there matters. That's what creates corruption. And I'm proud to say that our campaign has not and will not take corporate PAC or lobbyist dollars, folks. And why? Because I want to come out and serve the people of Arizona. See, you're going to go back to your lives. And the lobbyists that give you money, you know what they're going to do? They're going to hang out outside your front door as governor. And if they've helped you get here, they're going to expect something in return. I'm not taking their money because I want to walk right past them. Walk right past every one of those dark suits and come back out here and serve the people that are serving Arizona. Now, here's the thing. That makes fundraising a little harder, folks. It makes fundraising more difficult, but the exciting part is our campaign has a tremendous number of individual donors, more individual donors than any other campaign. In addition, I'm proud to say that as a couple months ago, for those who are teachers or educators, our campaign received 87% of those dollars. That's saying something. Doug Ducey, 0. Nothing. He didn't even know a teacher next door, maybe a family member who could help him. And we're able to get that support.
I'm not taking corporate PAC money or money from lobbyists, but I'm going to let you in on a little secret that I've learned during this campaign. It's not just big corporations that use their dollars to influence policy in Arizona. It's people of wealth. I have talked to donors, people that I know personally, who have said, Kelly, I can't support you because one of your opponents has said he won't raise taxes in order to pay for public schools. Now, he has since changed his mind. It took 270,000 signatures to convince him that Invest in Ed is a good idea. I've talked to donors who actually had house parties scheduled and on their calendar for my campaign. Wealthy folks in our community who said, you know what, I've talked to my friends, and we all send our kids to private and charter schools. And you've said that you don't support tax credits for those schools. One of your opponent has actually served on the board of a charter school, has said that the charter school that his kid goes to should be the best school in the country. And I believe the best school for every kid in the state should be the local district public school. I'm not spending all my time on the phone talking to wealthy folks. You'll see it in my finance report this week. I'm spending my time talking to the people of Arizona, all of us.
We're going to have closing statements now, folks. Each candidate is going, didn't that go fast? Each candidate will have 2 minutes. And once the last person has spoke, I know there's going to be an uproar and you're going to be excited to get out of here and clap for your folks. But just a reminder that we are a club that works with dues and membership. And those are found outside on the table. We would love to have some of you join us. If you decide that you can't bear to leave, then please take a seat, have a drink, order lunch, do something to help promote the restaurant that has given us this space. Okay? Thank you. Okay. Closing statements, and we will start with Mr. Garcia.
Lucy, everyone, thank you very much for coming out. It's amazing to see so many people here. Thank you very much. Did you get the question, how are you going to beat Doug Ducey? We didn't ask that question?
Well,
Folks, that is the question. We can talk ideas up here all we want to, but if we don't win, none of them come to fruition. Here's what we know. And as you're thinking about which candidate should be standing there, think about this. Which one can beat Doug Ducey? Let me tell you something, folks. On that score, there is no question at all. It is me. Let me tell you three things. Number one, let's start with education. We know that the public is angry at Doug Ducey with education. We know that he has failed public education. And he does not want to stand next to an educator who is going to remind him at every turn of his failings. He doesn't remind somebody who has been in Arizona's public schools to security. He has filmed a commercial standing in front of a group of men and women in uniform. This is a man who has never worn a uniform. That false bravado is going to fall pale when he stands next to a man who has. Because the choice we're going to give Arizona in terms of service and integrity and patriotism is the choice between a man who served ice cream and a man who served his country, folks. And number three, I'm sure you talked immigration, am I right? Let's be honest with each other. You did not. Unbelievable. Well, let me tell you this. Are we going to talk immigration in this election? Yeah. Folks, the core crux of immigration, just to be frank, is anti-Latino animosity. That's what this is about. Let's just be frank. And so how about this? How about somebody from the Latino community to be the voice to lead and strike back against this hatred and bigotry that has defined our state for too long? I'll tell you right now, folks, Doug Ducey doesn't want to stand next to us, and that's the reason why the RNC is already barking at our campaign, because they know we're ahead. Thank you.
I'm not going to give the usual speech I give at this point. I'm going to tell you something that I've never said in public before. I hate politics. No, I mean I hate politics. I don't hate government. Government, you know, when I was a kid, government was sending, you know, was launching a space program and fighting poverty and passing civil rights laws. Government is our voice. Government is our power. It is our collective power to decide where we invest our money so that our families are safe, so that our kids have opportunity from going to the best schools. Government is our power, but politics has broken government. And if I hated politics before, after running this campaign for 5 or 6 months, I hate it even more. Because I've discovered that there are a couple of old white men in Phoenix who decide what is news in Arizona. Because I've watched people who are progressive leaders in our state support candidates that they know do not share progressive values. Because I've watched candidates swing to the left in the primary, and we know they'll swing to the right in the general, and we don't know what they'll do when they're in office because we don't know exactly what they believe. We are seeing people all across this country begin to break politics in order to save government. We're seeing candidates get elected who stand on values, not on whatever the polls say. I am running to be the governor of Arizona because I believe that we can break politics in this state and actually save our government, save ourselves, save our neighbors, and save our kids. Somebody who was just elected to represent the Democrats in a race for Congress in the Bronx, who should never have been elected, she said, don't vote for the candidate who you think can win. Vote for the candidate who you think should win. I hope to have your support.
I'm not sure we should break politics. I think that's the message we heard from the guy in the White House right now. And that's not working terribly well. I think we need to use politics to be able to take our state for all of us instead of a couple of Kansas billionaires. And that's why I'm running. I've had 12 years in the state legislature. I'm the only Democratic candidate running who has ever served as an elected official. I'm also the only candidate running who has ever won a campaign. And as you know around here, I've won 6 in a row. So I know how to win. And after 12 years in this legislature in the minority, I got some fire in my belly. So that's giving me the energy and the power to get out there and get this thing done. It also gives me the knowledge for how to govern from day one. Because yes, we need to win, and I know how to win. And I plan to win this thing with your help, because that's the only way I do it. But I also, once I win, we need to have somebody who knows how to govern from day one, who's not intimidated by this crazy legislature, which somehow, when people come up to it first thing, you're right in the middle of it, all of you're like, what the heck, who are these people? What are they doing? How do I control this thing? I'm not intimidated by these guys. And like I said, I know how to use a carrot, and I know how to use a stick when necessary. Give me veto power, we can do a whole lot of things. This is going to be important. This is a really, really important election. Yes, we have the power of the blue wave behind us. We saw that 16-point Democratic swing in Sun City. But it doesn't mean a darn thing if you guys don't leave here today and go tell 10 of your friends and have them tell 10 of your friends that there is the possibility of change here in Arizona, and it is in all of our hands. And I don't mind if you decide you want to support Kelly, or you want to support David, or you want to support me. I want you to work as hard as you can, because our democracy depends on it. Will you do that when you go home today? Yes. Thank you.
Okay, let it loose. Give it a hand to our excellent Democratic candidate.